What's going on, guys? We're back to working on the engine for the S10 V8 swap. So it's been a minute since I posted a video. That's because I've been busy. So check this out. We got our old crusty block is pretty and painted now and pretty much ready for assembly. So I put in a bunch of work on this, and I didn't film a lot of it because I'll get into it here in a minute. I didn't want this to be so much about like building an engine, because this is more about doing the engine swap. So we're gonna get into what stock parts we're keeping, like what mods I'm doing to make a little more power on a budget. This is trying to keep this budget. Things are really expensive these days, so I mean, it's expensive, but for the most part it's on a budget. Now there is one big thing that changed on our top end, and my hand was kind of forced on it, so we're gonna stick around for that. It's gonna be like a PSA for these Vortec 350 motors. So that's what we're diving into. All right, the block is all cleaned up and we got it painted and it's all been gone through. We have new bearings in here. This has been carefully checked over. Our decks are straight. We did a good crosshatch on here. We actually did it with like a stone and then just used a ball hone for the final grit, not just throw the ball hone in. These cylinders are nice and straight. They've been thoroughly checked. I've done a lot of measurements, and that's the thing. I'm doing like I'm gonna say like a 90% blueprint job on this. And if you don't know what that means, it basically means you're measuring and checking and you're moving parts around to try to make everything equal and balanced, to just make the engine just a little bit better than something that was just kind of thrown together at the factory, because there are differences in factory parts. So let me get into that real quick. I'm just gonna touch on it. So like our decks, they're straight, but the way they're cut, they're like at an angle, if that makes sense. So like here, it was like 32 thousandths. We took the same piston, put it over here. It was only like 30 thousandths. It's a very slight difference, but it is a difference. So with our parts, we are reusing stock crank, by the way. And we're reusing stock rods and pistons. So these have been measured. We can put our tallest ones in our tallest holes, shortest ones in the shortest, get everything equal. I've also weighed all these and tried to get everything to as close as possible. Even like measured all the rings. The rings have been file fitted, which was fun. And just going through all the little details. Like I even weighed all these different nuts on here and tried to put like the heaviest ones on the lightest rods. It's something that's going to affect the longevity. You make more power with stock junk. So it's just getting the most out of it. So now that we touched on that, stock crank, stock rods, stock pistons, the bottom end is pretty much staying the same. Just cleaned it up and tried to improve it a little bit. We have new bearings. I am reusing, let's see, main bolts are sitting over there. We're reusing the stock main bolts. We're using the stock head bolts. Nothing tore up on them. I think we're okay to reuse them. We're not making any kind of crazy power with this. Checked all the stock lifters, cleaned them. Everything looks good. They're getting reused. Oil pump's been checked. It's getting reused. So we're replacing some of the basic stuff, like, you know, you pretty much have to, like the timing set. Just a real cheap basic one from Summit. So where I'm at right now is I wanted to catch up with you guys because I have to put this bottom end together, and then I can get into the top end, and that's where actually a lot of our mods are. That's pretty much where all the mods are. That's pretty much where all the mods are. That's pretty much where all the mods are. Stock rods, stock pistons, stock pistons, stock pistons, stock pistons. We're not using stock pistons. So some things have changed. Let me get into this here. So this engine is actually assembled now. We have pistons and rods, crankshaft, camshaft, the timings all put together. I was almost about to start getting into the top end and get into the second part of this video here. So the plan was to keep the stock pistons and keep the stock heads and just minimal, basically a cam, a little bit thinner head gaskets, and then, you know, little mods along the way, and just send it with that and have a great improvement. So this is a whole snowball effect here, so you got to stick with me. So we're going to come back to the pistons. Now, what we're going to look at first is these heads. This is the stock Vortec heads, and they have some really nice, nasty cracks in them. So this one has 2 cracks in it. My other one, I think, is good, but this one's junk. That's all it is. It's junk now. There's nothing you can do about it, and I'm not replacing it because, in my opinion, Vortec heads are junk. So I'm gonna get someone riled up by saying that. Vortec heads suck. They're junk. They're garbage because they all crack. They have really good flow numbers. You can do a little bit of porting, and you do a whole bunch of other mods to them. They're pretty decent factory heads, but you know what? It's not worth it because I'd have to tear apart like 3 more trucks to try to find one good head. And there's no guarantee that after I do all the work to put this together, it doesn't just crack later. So ignore that hole right there. And to run a bigger camshaft, I'm sure if you've looked into these motors at all, not to mention they weigh a ton. These pressed rocker studs, they have to go. You have to figure out some kind of different spring combination. I was going to use like the typical LS beehive springs to try to get around that. If you run different size rockers, your push rods will rub in the little push rod holes, and there's just a whole host of mods you have to do, not to mention if you want them to really flow some good air, there's some minor porting. It is pretty minor from what I looked up, some like unshrouding, and it just adds to it. And you know, this is all stuff that you could possibly mess up trying to do it yourself. So that's garbage. So now I did a little bit of research, and I found something that I think is comparable to that and very similar for a good price. We got AFR heads. So yes, these are aftermarket aluminum heads, and they're fully assembled. They already have springs, everything you need. These are actually pretty well priced. So I'm not going to say prices because everything fluctuates, but for the price to get new aftermarket cast iron heads, you can get these. It's almost the same price. These are maybe just a little bit more, but they're ready to go. They actually flow more than those. And I was looking up numbers of people like pro ported versions of Vortex. It's basically the same. These match out, and this is just out of the box. It's clean. You don't have to do anything to it. I'll put a link to these in the description. I plan to do that with most parts I'm using. These are the big thing though. So they're set up, they have springs, they can accept the old school valve covers, the Vortec valve covers, whatever you want, it's all there. Push rod holes are huge. You're not having anything rubbing in there. They come with guide plates, so you don't have to limit yourself to just self-aligning rockers. And let me see if I can flip this over. And of course, look, I can do it with like 2 fingers because it's not a boat anchor. It's actually lightweight, something that belongs on a performance engine. They're still the same size 64 chambers, and you get new valves. Not to mention that the old valves that came out of those, the exhaust ones, were kind of pitted, and I was going to try to lap them, but there was something that probably should have been replaced. More time and money. So those are out of here. We're going with these. Same size chamber, has everything else is pretty much the same, and they flow more air. So for the price, I feel like that was the best way to go. And I get to ditch some weight since I'm going from a V6 to a V8. This is going to help balance out some of the extra weight that I'm adding up front. So that's a cool bonus. Okay, so now back to these pistons. Now that I've showed you the heads. Now, I was going to reuse these. And see, this isn't even completely my fault. It's really annoying, honestly. So the way they spec these from the factory is these Vortecs are supposed to make like 9.4, 9.3-ish compression. And now that I had it all put together, I was actually able to like measure my like deck heights and stuff. And I put all that into like Summit's compression calculator, and I was playing around with that, and I couldn't get that number that they were getting, and I looked into it, and basically they lied. So which was really nice of them. So I think they put really thin head gaskets on when they do like the dyno tests or whatever it is. They change some minor things, and then the actual production engine has more clearance built into it, like for safety, you know, so it doesn't detonate on cheap junk gas. So they're actually closer to like 9-to-1 if you're lucky, maybe like 8.9-to-1, which is pretty horrible. Now, for those iron heads over there, if you want to run cheap gas, you wouldn't want to do more than 9.4-to-1, not 8.9-to-1. So now we're going to aluminum heads. That changes things. Now we can up the compression with no negative effects. I'm estimating we can go up to 9.7-to-1, which is what like a stock Vortec truck engine, you know, LS series, they run 9.7-ish if they're not lying about that. My Trans Am I think is 10.5-to-1. And it's premium recommended, but you can still run regular gas in it. So we're not running 8.9, 9-to-1, and just leaving power on the table. So even with a thinner head gasket, it's going to be like 9.1 at the highest, maybe 9.2, and that's just not going to fly. So there's 2 ways to fix that. Get the whole deck blocked. Deck the new heads I just got, which requires going to a machine shop. I don't even know if I even have a reliable machine shop around me, and we're trying to do all of this at home. So we're changing out these pistons because there's all this extra volume in here. We need some flat tops, which is what I was originally going to do, but I wanted to make sure that this can run off of regular gas because it's not a race car, it's not going in a Camaro, it's going in our truck that we use to tow. I don't want to buy 93 gas, maybe mid-grade at the highest. We'll see how it goes when like they tune it. So yeah, that sucks because I already file fit all the rings and it's all together. Now I have to rip this all apart, get some flat tops, and that's the next thing we're gonna have to catch up on. Okay, and then the camshaft we're running in here is going to be the HT 383. It's the Chevy brand camshaft. So it's the engine that would be in their stock 383 like crate motor they have, the Ramjet 350. They use it in a few different things. It's kind of like an RV cam. They use it, it's like the next step over the stock cam. It pulls to a little bit higher RPM, but it makes a lot more power in the lower end. So it'll be really nice for a truck setup. Now, we were gonna bump that up a little bit. So the reason I went with that cam in the first place is because it was gonna be friendly to the stock heads. It was about the most you can run with all of those limitations we were talking about. Now, I'm still gonna change these out just to be safe, and just the whole host of things we're gonna have to do to those. So now we're moving on to these heads, and I was gonna run that to get a little bit more out of it. I was gonna run 1.6 ratio rockers. These are these comp cam ones. This is what I ended up getting. They were pretty much the best value. So these ones are not self-aligning, which is fine because our new heads have guide plates, so we don't have to have self-aligning ones, because the only other cheap self-aligning ones seemed a little sketchy on the quality. So these ones seem okay. Gonna see if we can still fit them under the stock covers. That'll be maybe a little bit of modification, but hey, that's what we do. So all right, guys, so that's pretty much everything I got for you right now. So I got a bunch of stuff to figure out after I just refigured everything out. So thanks for hanging out. Have a nice freaking day.